I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it. That's the bit that excites me, is the idea of being able to bring some change. Not overly radical change, but changes that I think need.
Nobody inside the reception expected the evening to become the story dominating every royal headline by sunrise. One moment, conversations flowed politely beneath glittering chandeliers. The next, every eye was fixed on a deeply emotional exchange involving Diana's brother and Queen Camilla. Witness accounts would later differ over exactly what was said and how events unfolded. But one detail appeared consistently across reports and commentary. Prince William and Catherine immediately realized that what had just happened could not simply be ignored. For years, the royal family had carefully balanced public duty with private history. Diana's legacy remained one of the monarchy's most sensitive subjects, capable of reigniting powerful emotions decades later. As news of the confrontation spread, commentators began asking the same question. Had this become the moment that finally forced William and Catherine to step beyond quiet diplomacy and take action to protect both family stability and Diana's memory? Within hours, newspapers, television programs, and online commentators were piecing together competing accounts. Some described the scene as respectful but emotional. Others portrayed it as evidence of long-standing family tensions resurfacing in public.
This, of course, came as a huge shock. And William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family. As you can imagine, this has taken time. It has taken me time to recover from...
No official statement immediately clarified every claim, leaving speculation to race ahead of confirmed facts. Yet, amid the uncertainty, one reality stood out. Whatever had taken place had instantly become one of the most talked-about royal stories of the week. Hi viewers, if you believe Diana's legacy deserves to be remembered and protected for future generations, don't just watch this story unfold. Subscribe, like this video, and comment for Diana below. Every like tells YouTube this story matters, every comment keeps this conversation alive, and every new subscriber helps ensure these royal stories continue reaching people who still care. I'd genuinely love to see how many of you are standing with Diana's legacy today. That single question reflects why this story captured so much public attention. For millions, Diana is remembered not only as a princess, but as a mother whose influence continues to shape the lives of her sons. Any public disagreement connected to her legacy naturally invites intense scrutiny. Whether every rumor surrounding this episode proves accurate or not, the emotional impact on those involved became the focus of endless discussion. What happened next proved even more intriguing. Rather than responding with dramatic public statements, William and Catherine appeared to adopt a measured approach. Royal observers noticed subtle changes in tone during subsequent engagements, while commentators debated whether private conversations were taking place behind palace walls. Without direct confirmation, every appearance, every photograph, and every carefully chosen word was examined for possible meaning. The silence itself became part of the story. Experienced royal correspondents often point out that the monarchy rarely answers speculation immediately. Instead, responses tend to emerge through actions rather than headlines. That pattern fueled even greater curiosity. If William and Catherine were indeed preparing to respond, what form would that response take? And would it satisfy a public eager for clarity? As the debate intensified, memories of Diana's enduring legacy resurfaced across television specials, newspaper columns, and social media discussions. Supporters praised her lasting humanitarian impact, while analysts reflected on the complex relationships that have shaped the modern monarchy over the past several decades. The reported confrontation became less about one evening and more about the continuing influence of Diana's memory on the royal family today. Attention also turned toward Earl Spencer, who has long spoken publicly about preserving his sister's legacy. His past remarks were revisited by commentators seeking context, while royal experts offered differing interpretations of his role within the wider family story. Some viewed the reported confrontation as the culmination of years of unresolved emotion. Others cautioned against drawing conclusions from incomplete information. Meanwhile, another question quietly emerged. Why did William and Catherine appear determined to avoid adding fuel to an already emotional situation? Those closest to royal reporting suggested that preserving stability often requires restraint rather than immediate reaction. Whether that assessment accurately reflected their thinking remained unknown, but it aligned with the couple's established public style of careful, deliberate decision-making.
It's quite clear from the introduction that I sat in on the 19th September 1995, everyone was going to be made untrustworthy. And I think that Diana did lose trust in really key people.
If they were preparing to act, it seemed increasingly likely that their actions would speak louder than any public statement. Before we uncover what royal commentators believe happened behind closed doors and why this episode may have marked an important moment for William and Catherine, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts below. The next chapter explores the reported discussions, the growing public pressure, and the difficult choices that may have shaped the couple's response as this extraordinary royal story continued to unfold. The remarkable part of this story was never the confrontation alone. Moments of visible tension occasionally appear around famous families, and headlines often magnify every expression or gesture. What captured public attention afterward was the suggestion that William and Catherine quietly shifted their own approach behind closed doors. No official statement immediately explained their thinking. Palace representatives remained characteristically reserved. That silence only encouraged commentators to examine every public appearance, every photograph, and every carefully chosen word for clues. Observers began revisiting Diana's lasting influence on both of her sons. More than 25 years after her death, her legacy still inspires powerful emotions around the world. Her charitable work, public warmth, and enduring popularity continue to shape conversations about the modern monarchy.
So angry. It was anger, and I thought, why is this? Well, it was sort of boy. I thought it was an old man, was probably not a great deal older than me, but and I think...
Because of that history, any disagreement connected to her memory inevitably attracts enormous attention, whether the underlying reports are fully confirmed or based largely on interpretation. Commentators also pointed toward Earl Spencer's long record of publicly defending his sister's legacy. His speeches over the years have often reflected his determination to preserve Diana's memory, as he believes she should be remembered. That background made many viewers wonder whether this reported emotional exchange represented years of private frustration finally surfacing, or simply another moment amplified by intense media coverage. The truth remained difficult to establish because eyewitness accounts differed significantly from one another. While speculation dominated television discussions, another question quietly emerged inside royal commentary circles. Why did William and Catherine appear noticeably more deliberate in the days that followed? Body language experts analyzed photographs frame by frame. Royal correspondents compared engagement schedules. Newspapers searched for patterns that might reveal whether anything had changed inside the family. None of those observations provided definitive answers, yet together they created an unmistakable impression that something important may have been unfolding away from public view. Some analysts argued that William had reached a stage in his life where protecting stability had become just as important as protecting tradition. Others believed Catherine's influence had become increasingly significant whenever emotionally difficult family situations arose. Neither theory could be confirmed, but both reflected a broader belief that the Prince and Princess of Wales were gradually developing their own style of leadership, one focused on measured decisions rather than emotional reactions. Even so, one uncomfortable reality refused to disappear. Every fresh headline seemed to pull Diana's name back into the center of another national debate. Supporters of different perspectives filled newspaper comment sections with sharply divided opinions. Some defended Camilla's position, arguing that years had passed and the monarchy had evolved. Others insisted Diana's memory required exceptional sensitivity whenever it entered public discussion. The growing divide demonstrated how deeply personal these stories remain for millions of people who still remember the extraordinary events that shaped the royal family during the 1990s. As the debate intensified, experienced royal observers noticed something unusual. Neither William nor Catherine rushed to answer the mounting speculation. There were no emotional interviews, no dramatic public speeches, no visible attempt to win the news cycle. Instead, there appeared to be careful patience, suggesting that any response, if one came at all, would happen on their own terms rather than under public pressure. That quiet restraint only fueled greater curiosity, because silence often becomes louder than words.
Well, quite soon we'll find out, but there are very big questions still out there for me as to the broader picture of how something like this could have happened.
And what are they?
It's clear to me that there are certain people who were in the BBC who have behaved in a way that is truly abysmal.
When the entire world is waiting for an explanation. If the confrontation itself created the headlines, what happened next would determine whether this episode faded into another week of royal speculation or marked the beginning of a far more important turning point. Behind palace walls, according to widespread commentary, conversations were only just beginning, and those discussions would soon place William and Catherine in the most delicate position they had faced in years. Before the story moves deeper into those reported discussions and the competing claims surrounding them, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who enjoys thoughtful royal commentary. Every new viewer helps keep these conversations going, and what unfolded after that emotional scene may prove even more compelling than the confrontation that first captured everyone's attention. The heavy oak doors of the Royal Advisory Suite clicked shut with a sharp, final thud, cutting off the muted roar of press photographers outside. Inside, the air felt suffocating. Prince William stood near the tall, arched window, his posture tense, staring down at a tablet screen flickering with real-time headlines. Catherine sat nearby, her face pale but remarkably composure-held, her fingers resting lightly on the arm of her chair. They did not need to speak to acknowledge what had just happened. The public floor of the reception had become a battleground, and the smoke had not even begun to clear. Across the polished mahogany table, two senior communications strategists were already deep in debate, their voices hushed, yet edged with panic. On the screen, video clips of Earl Spencer's unexpected approach were already multiplying exponentially. Every frame was being sliced, slowed down, and analyzed by millions across the globe. Commentators were claiming voices had been raised. Media outlets were declaring a historic rift between the Spencer family and the current inner circle of the monarchy. The narrative was spinning wildly out of control, and every passing second without an official response made the silence look like confirmation. William turned slowly away from the window. His voice was low, carrying a cold, quiet weight that immediately silenced the room. He made it clear that doing nothing was no longer a viable path, but rushing out a hasty, emotional statement could trigger an even worse institutional disaster. The immediate conflict inside the room was not about whether the incident was painful. It was about how to survive the aftermath. One senior official urged an immediate firm denial, advocating for a narrative that minimized the entire scene as a brief, harmless misunderstanding between family members. Another advisor countered sharply, arguing that downplaying the event would look like an insult to the memory of Diana and invite severe public backlash. Catherine listened quietly to the back and forth, her focus remaining entirely on the long-term emotional fallout. She pointed out that if they responded out of anger or defensiveness, they would satisfy the immediate media appetite, while damaging fragile personal relationships beyond repair. For William, the situation was a psychological minefield. He was not just the heir navigating a public relations emergency, he was a son torn between the institutional protection of the crown and the raw, lingering emotional wounds attached to his mother's legacy. Rumors were already circulating among press circles that private conversations within the palace were growing increasingly heated. Unverified reports suggested that advisors were split into camps, with some advocating for total institutional silence and others insisting on a direct personal gesture to calm public anger. Then came a sudden knock at the door, breaking the tense silence. A communications officer entered, holding a fresh brief, fresh off the wire. A major national outlet was preparing to publish what it claimed were leaked details of a confidential discussion held just hours before the reception. The leak suggested that the confrontation was not an isolated emotional outburst, but the culmination of weeks of unspoken friction over an upcoming memorial initiative. William took the paper, reading the key lines in silence. The room watched his face, waiting for a reaction. The presence of a leak inside their close-knit network changed everything instantly. It meant someone within the broader circle was feeding the fire, deliberately shaping public perception for their own motives. If you are watching this, and you claim to truly respect the memory of Princess Diana, ask yourself an honest question. How can anyone sit back and watch her legacy be turned into a political chess game without taking a side? Leave your answer in the comments right now with either stand with William or demands transparency, because remaining indifferent while this family struggles is something no genuine viewer should do. If you care about the truth behind these headlines, subscribe right now, hit the like button, and share this video immediately. Walking away without subscribing means you are turning your back on the most critical moments of this story. The atmosphere in the room shifted from shock to calculated precision. The discovery of the potential leak turned a public relations challenge into a serious internal investigation. William and Catherine looked at each other, the realization dawning that the threat was not just outside the palace walls, but possibly inside the very room where strategy was being drawn. They knew that every move they made from this moment forward would be scrutinized under a visual microscope. The media was hungering for a misstep, eager to frame every subtle shift in posture or expression as a sign of deep internal division. Yet, despite the immense pressure pushing them to react instantly, William remained steadfast in his refusal to be rushed into a public battle. As the meeting stretched into the late hours, new reports continued to flood in from newsrooms around the world. Television networks were broadcasting emergency panels, debating whether this episode signaled a permanent breakdown in relations between key figures in the royal landscape. Some commentators insisted that Queen Camilla had been deeply unsettled by the encounter, while others claimed the entire event was being wildly blown out of proportion by media houses looking for outrage. Separating fact from theatrical speculation was becoming almost impossible for the public. Within the room, Catherine emphasized the need for absolute unity and calm. She argued that the strength of their position relied entirely on dignity, restraint, and an unwavering commitment to duty. Rushing out an emotional defense would only validate the sensationalism. The priority had to be protecting the integrity of the family, while ensuring that Diana's memory was handled with the sacred respect it deserved. Yet, as the advisors finalized their initial strategy for the coming morning, the quiet tension in the room remained thick. The leaked information proved that someone was orchestrating events from the shadows, ensuring that the conflict stayed alive in the headlines. Just as William prepared to wrap up the session and clear the room, his private secretary stepped forward with a fresh, unconfirmed intelligence report. A new piece of information had just emerged from a trusted source outside the palace walls, one that completely altered how William viewed the entire sequence of events leading up to the confrontation. The phone receiver hit the cradle with a heavy, hollow click that reverberated through the dimly lit office, shattering the silence of the early morning hours. Prince William stood motionless in the shadow of the study, the unconfirmed report still fresh in his mind, his breath tight in his chest. The fresh intelligence did not point toward a random media leak or an accidental emotional outburst. It pointed toward a calculated sequence of moves designed to force a permanent public wedge over his mother's memory. Every assumption they had made during the late-night advisory session was suddenly stripped away, leaving a chilling reality in its place. The public confrontation had not been a sudden flare-up of anger. It was the trigger mechanism of a far larger maneuver. Outside the palace gates, the rain began to fall in heavy, relentless sheets, but the media trucks remained parked bumper to bumper, their dish antennas tilted upward, transmitting constant streams of speculation across the globe. Newspaper headlines were already screaming across morning newsstands, framing the encounter in extreme, sensational terms. Commentators debated whether the confrontation represented a personal revolt by Earl Spencer or an unforgivable breach of royal protocol. Yet behind the palace walls, the tension was no longer about public perception. It was about the unbearable emotional weight hanging over every decision William had to make. He walked over to a small display cabinet in the corner of the room, staring at a framed photograph of Princess Diana taken decades ago. The quiet intensity of her memory seemed to fill the dark office. For more than a quarter of a century, her name had been both a beacon of global inspiration and an open wound within the family. Every tribute, every charity initiative, and every public appearance connected to her legacy carried an invisible, suffocating pressure. As her eldest son, William lived under the permanent burden of protecting her memory while simultaneously carrying the immense weight of the crown's future on his shoulders. That dual existence was pushing him to an absolute psychological breaking point. On one side stood the institutional expectation of emotional detachment, the cold mandate that the monarchy must remain above personal drama regardless of the provocation. On the other side stood the raw, instinctual duty of a son whose mother's name was being dragged once again into the center of a public power struggle. Reports whispered that private conversations between key members of the household had reached unprecedented levels of tension, with deep divisions emerging over how much tolerance should be shown to outside family figures who challenged the status quo. Catherine stepped quietly into the office, observing the heavy silence that enveloped her husband. She understood without asking that the emotional strain was reaching a critical threshold. The world looked at the situation as a high-stakes media spectacle, a dramatic storyline to be dissected and judged over morning coffee. But for William, it was a deeply personal trial that touched upon the most traumatic wounds of his childhood. Every headline analyzing the friction between Earl Spencer and Queen Camilla served as a painful reminder that his mother's legacy was still being contested, still being weaponized, and still being picked apart by commentators who cared nothing for the genuine grief behind the history. The narrative unfolding in the press was rapidly spinning into competing, dramatic claims. Unverified rumors suggested that Earl Spencer felt sidelined by recent institutional decisions surrounding memorial events, leading to years of built-up resentment finally boiling over in public. Other commentators asserted that Queen Camilla had been placed in an impossible position, attempting to support the institution while navigating the complicated shadows of the past. Media outlets printed conflicting accounts of who said what during the tense exchange, with some reporters claiming harsh words were spoken, while eyewitness accounts insisted the dialogue was brief and understated. Separating truth from manufactured drama was becoming impossible for the general public. But inside the private quarters, the emotional reality was brutally clear. The constant public debate over Diana was an open wound that refused to heal because every few years, fresh conflicts dragged it back into the daylight. If you are sitting there watching this video and you claim to truly honor the memory of Princess Diana, how can you remain passive while her memory is used as a weapon in a public power struggle? Ask yourself right now if you have the courage to stand up for genuine respect, or if you are fine with watching her story be torn apart for cheap headlines. Drop your response in the comments immediately with either protect Diana legacy or stop the exploitation, because if you stay silent now, you are actively participating in the neglect of her memory. Subscribe to this channel this very second, hit the like button, and share this video everywhere. If you close this window without subscribing, you are turning your back on the search for real truth and letting the sensationalists win. The morning light began to trickle through the high windows, casting long, pale shadows across the floorboards. The hours of quiet reflection were coming to an end, and the reality of the upcoming day was fast approaching. Advisors were already assembling in the lower offices, preparing morning briefings, monitoring social media metrics, and drafting contingency statements. Yet the standard corporate machinery of the royal household felt entirely inadequate to address the deep emotional crisis at hand. William sat at his desk, staring down at a handwritten note containing details of a prospective private conversation offered late the previous night. It was an invitation to speak directly, away from the advisors, away from the security details, and away from the hovering eyes of palace staff. It was an offer to bypass the entire public relations structure and confront the core of the conflict face to face. Catherine walked over and stood beside his chair, her expression grim, reading the note over his shoulder. The decision was fraught with extreme danger. A private meeting carried the massive risk of further leaks, distorted accounts, and deepened betrayal if the contents were ever weaponized by third parties. But continuing to hide behind formal palace statements and strategic silences was allowing the legacy of Diana to be slowly poisoned by endless speculation. The ticking of the tall grandfather clock in the corner seemed to grow louder with every passing second, counting down the moment until the daily press briefings would begin. The world was waiting for a sign, a statement, or a gesture that would reveal where the Prince and Princess of Wales stood amidst the rising storm. William looked up at Catherine, his decision forming in the quiet stillness of the room. One private conversation had just taken place over a secured line, and the words spoken during those brief minutes left William and Catherine utterly convinced that silence was no longer an option. The heavy leather binder slammed onto the glass table, rattling the crystal water glasses and halting the briefing before another word could be spoken. Prince William stood over the assembled council of senior advisors, his hand resting flat on the cover of the strategic document. The period of passive observation was over. The private call had confirmed their worst suspicions, proving that third parties were actively feeding misleading narratives to media hubs to force a permanent public rupture. Every recommendation on the table advocated for traditional institutional detachment, advising the couple to stay out of the headline storm and allow the press cycle to burn itself out. But William rejected the traditional playbook outright. He made it unmistakably clear that allowing unverified claims to define his mother's legacy while staying silent was a form of complicity he refused to accept. Catherine leaned forward, placing a single typed sheet in the center of the table. It was the outline of a carefully calculated, independent course of action designed to bypass the traditional PR apparatus entirely. Their strategy did not focus on issuing defensive denials or engaging in petty public arguments. Instead, it was built on taking direct control of upcoming public engagements, refocusing national attention on genuine charitable work directly connected to Diana's core values, and cutting off the oxygen supporting the speculative press. The atmosphere inside the room turned instantly tense. Several senior officials openly voiced resistance, warning that taking an independent stance risked alienating other branches of the royal household and creating a public perception of deep internal division. One advisor warned that shifting tactics so abruptly would be interpreted by newsrooms as a direct rebuke of the official institutional response. But Catherine addressed the room with calm, unyielding precision. She pointed out that the current institutional silence was failing completely. Public speculation was growing more extreme by the hour, and every passing day of inaction allowed outside interests to manipulate the story for their own gain. Outside the palace, the media circus had reached a fever pitch. Satellite vans lined the perimeter walls, and live broadcasts analyzed every movement through the gates. Tabloids printed sensational stories claiming that secret crisis summits were taking place, alleging that Queen Camilla had demanded a firm reprimand against Earl Spencer, while other unverified accounts claimed that William had refused to attend family meetings until the leaks stopped. Commentators traded wild theories about private feuds, creating an atmosphere of ongoing scandal that threatened to overshadow the actual work of the monarchy. Inside the briefing room, William and Catherine systematically dismantled every objection raised by the traditionalists. They were not seeking a public battle or looking to settle personal scores. Their goal was singular and absolute: protect the dignity of the family, prevent further public exploitation of Diana's memory, and establish a firm boundary that no outside pressure could cross. The psychological toll on both William and Catherine was immense. For William, taking this stand meant walking a razor-thin line between his duty as heir to the throne and his deep-seated obligation as a protective son. Every word of the proposed strategy had to be weighed with extreme care, ensuring it conveyed quiet strength without escalating the public conflict. Catherine remained the steady anchor throughout the intense debate, refining every detail and ensuring that their approach balanced firm emotional boundaries with impeccable public service. Unconfirmed reports continued to trickle in from press contacts, suggesting that key media figures were preparing to launch fresh investigative pieces looking into the historic roots of the family tension. The pressure on the couple to abandon their plan and fall back into line with the broader institutional machinery was relentless. Senior staff members urged them to reconsider, arguing that a unified front with the wider household was essential for long-term stability. If you are sitting there watching this video right now and you claim to genuinely care about justice for Princess Diana, how can you look away while her memory is dragged through the dirt for cheap clicks? Ask yourself right now if you are going to stand by silently while her sons struggle against endless press manipulation, or if you have the backbone to demand respect for her name. Type your answer in the comments immediately with either "Stand with William" or "Stop the exploitation," because ignoring this moment makes you part of the problem. Hit that subscribe button right this second, smash the like button, and share this video everywhere. If you leave this page without subscribing, you are choosing to turn a blind eye to the painful reality this family faces every single day. As the afternoon sun faded, leaving cold shadows stretching across the office floor, the final details of the plan were locked into place. The advisors, though visibly uneasy about the departure from standard protocol, recognized that William and Catherine were resolute. There would be no backing down, no timid statements, and no hiding behind vague press releases. The strategy was set. Key public appearances were rescheduled, specific memorial initiatives were quietly brought forward, and a clear message was prepared for internal release to signal that the narrative surrounding Diana's memory would no longer be left at the mercy of outside commentators or hidden leakers. William closed the heavy leather binder, looking around the room at the exhausted faces of his team. The battle over public perception was about to move into its most volatile phase. The plan was finalized and the orders were given. But as the team gathered their files to leave, a heavy, unspoken anxiety hung over the room. The decision is ready, but nobody knows how it will be received. The flashbulbs erupted in a blinding, synchronized wall of white light as Prince William and Catherine stepped out into the crisp morning air, cutting through the heavy silence of the gathered crowd. There was no hesitation in William's stride. Alongside Catherine, his presence carried an unmistakable, quiet defiance that caught the waiting press corps completely off guard. Instead of retreating from the public eye or appearing shaken by days of relentless scandal, the couple stepped directly into the spotlight to execute their strategy. They walked straight toward a major community engagement, honoring grassroots legacy projects, an event carefully brought forward to reclaim the public narrative. Every camera lens tracked their movements, searching for subtle signs of strain, yet the image presented to the world was one of unbreakable composure and unified resolve. The shift in tone was immediate and electric. Within hours, live television broadcasts were forced to pivot from sensationalized palace intrigue to the substance of the couple's actions. By taking direct control of the public narrative, William and Catherine effectively neutralized the speculative frenzy that had dominated the news cycle for days. They did not utter a single defensive word about the confrontation between Earl Spencer and Queen Camilla. They did not address the persistent leaks or validate the wild theories circulating across internet forums. Instead, their actions spoke with a cold, absolute clarity that rendered the surrounding media drama secondary. Across the globe, public response fractured into intense debate. Media commentators analyzed the maneuver with meticulous detail, with some praising the couple for their tactical brilliance and emotional restraint in protecting Diana's memory. Other analysts argued that the measured response was merely a sophisticated form of institutional damage control, designed to bury deep family divisions beneath a polished public facade. Rumors continued to swirl through press circles, with unverified reports claiming that behind closed doors, senior palace traditionalists remained deeply uneasy about the couple's independent course of action. Yet despite the ongoing chatter, the immediate crisis had been contained. For William, executing this move was an exercise in intense emotional discipline. He had taken a profound personal risk to ensure that his mother's legacy remained focused on human impact rather than petty institutional politics. By honoring her memory through direct, dignified action, he drew a firm boundary against those who sought to exploit her name for personal or political leverage. Catherine stood firmly beside him throughout every moment, proving once again that her steady presence was vital in navigating the complex psychological dynamics of the modern monarchy. Yet beneath the apparent triumph, a lingering shadow remained over the household. The strategic win could not erase the unsettling reality that someone within their broader operational circle had leaked sensitive information to the press. Unconfirmed reports suggested that an internal investigation was quietly underway to trace the origin of the information that triggered the confrontation. The public storm had passed, but the breach of trust inside the walls left a deep, permanent fracture that no public relations victory could heal. If you are watching this right now, and you truly care about the truth behind Princess Diana's memory, how can you just scroll away and pretend this legacy does not matter? Ask yourself if you have the integrity to stand up against press manipulation, or if you are comfortable letting her memory be traded like cheap gossip. Drop your answer in the comments immediately with either "Stand with Diana" or "Expose the leakers," because staying silent right now makes you complicit in the sensationalism. Subscribe to this channel this very second, hit the like button, and share this video everywhere. If you close this video without subscribing, you are turning your back on the truth and letting the manipulators control the story. As the afternoon sun dipped below the horizon and the flashing cameras finally fell silent, the initial shockwave of the confrontation began to settle into the pages of recent history. William and Catherine returned to their private quarters, leaving the public to debate the lasting impact of their swift action. This episode proved that while public speculation will always surround the royal family, William and Catherine are fully prepared to reshape the rules of engagement on their own terms. They showed that protecting a sacred memory requires strength, patience, and an absolute refusal to be drawn into endless drama. As public attention slowly fades, one unanswered question remains. Will this moment become a turning point in how future generations remember Diana's legacy, or simply another chapter in a long-running family story? Do not look away just yet, because the real shockwave is only beginning. In our very next episode, we uncover the encrypted paper trail that palace investigators just discovered buried inside an encrypted messaging group, revealing the exact identity of the high-ranking insider who orchestrated the leak from within William's private team. You cannot afford to miss a single second of what comes next. Subscribe right now so you do not miss the definitive exposure of the ultimate palace betrayal.